Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at a new album. Today it's the latest one by Blur, The Ballad of Darren. So yes, I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this review was actually requested by a user called Uncovered Universe, so thank you very much for requesting this. I think I would have been doing this review anyway, but I kind of thought, yeah, since it was requested, might as well get on it, and I'd review the album while it's still fresh. So yeah, this was Blur's latest album, released last week on, I forget what day it was, the 23rd I think it was released. It's their 9th studio album in total, and it's their first album since 2015's The Magic Whip, which that album was quite a big deal, you know, that was the first new music from the original lineup of Blur since 1999's album 13. So this one comes only I think what is it, 7 years and 8 years after that. So it's not been too long between this and The Magic Whip when you think about it relatively, but no, it has still been a while since Blur have put out any new music. So in the intervening years between The Magic Whip and this album, Damon Albarn returned to his Gorillaz project. Graham Coxon worked on some soundtracks, and the drummer Dave Ramsey released his first solo album earlier this year. So this album came about rather organically, with Albarn sort of writing songs while he was on tour with the Gorillaz in 2022. However, he was finding that the songs that he was writing were not really Gorillaz sounding songs, or would work as solo songs either. So he was thinking, well, I guess I better get Blur back together. Apparently he wrote around 20 new songs for Blur, whether only 10 were chosen for the album. So on this record, Blur used a new producer for them anyway, a guy called James Ford. He's worked with them on some of their solo projects, so Gorillaz and Coxton's own band Wave, but he's also worked with the likes of the Arctic Monkeys and many other famous bands from recent times. So the recording of the album was very quick and very spontaneous, recorded over the space of a few months earlier this year, and then they got it released very quickly, only finishing recording a few weeks before they kicked off on their before they kicked off on their reunion tour, which I was lucky enough to see in Newcastle, them playing I think the City Halls. It was a very small venue, really great concert. They're a great live band, put on a lot of energy, in terms of their performance. I guess my only criticism of seeing them live nowadays would be they lower the key on a lot of the songs. Of course, Albarn's voice has matured, and is a lot lower than it was back in the day. So they certainly they lower the key, and it's quite noticeable on certain tracks To the End and This Is a Low. They just feel they just felt a little bit off because of the key change. But no, still a overall a really good concert. So the album title, The Ballad of Darren, refers to a member of Damon Albarn's staff. I think he's a bodyguard or something. Who Albarn represents the everyman, and he was also the guy who sort of encouraged Albarn not to shy away from reforming Blur. So far the album has had a pretty positive and critical reception, with many sort of praising its apparent maturity, rather than it just being a nostalgia fest for the 90s. You know, this is a record which I guess you can sort of feel it's made by middle-aged guys, thing. They're not trying to relive their youth, and also got some quite personal lyrics on it as well. As it will probably be the chart positions aren't quite out yet when I'm filming, but I'm pretty sure I read that this is guaranteed to reach #1. It's outselling the rest of the top 10 combined. So yeah, another much deserved #1 album there for Blur. So I wanted to show you my vinyl copy of it here, and talk a bit about this album cover as well, which is actually a picture from an outdoor swimming pool in Gurrock on like the west coast of Scotland. It's like a slightly odd choice to odd location to choose, I guess, like your cover. But I think it's a good cover, and this is the Aside Records OB strip. So this kind of comes off, and then you've got the full cover there. But I like these kind of like exclusive like OB versions, like off like the album that you can get. So there's the back of it there, and then the inner sleeve looks like so you get all of the lyrics there, which is nice. And this guy on the back, I believe, is the Darren that the album is named after. And then the record there, said this one is on a nice blue vinyl here. So yeah, that is the record looked at. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album.
I fell in love with you. I met you at an early show.
So it kicks off with The Ballad, which is a reworking of a track which Avalon had, I think, kicking around since 2003, like the Think Tank sessions, and it's the one which, like kind of like Darren, like himself, like was kind of pestering Avalon, like to like sort of like finish up. But it's a lovely tune, this, you know, like it's got full of like sort of like loss and longing. Like I just looked into my life, and all I saw was that you're not coming back, and it kind of builds really well. He's got a great kind of intimate vocal performance on it, so really nice backing vocals as well, like from like Coxton, and the arrangement is just really nice. You've got some great kind of keyboard textures as well. All round a really good song, I think. Again, a real grower for me, you know. It's quite a slow one to kick off the album with, but I think it's a really nice opener there. So I would actually give The Ballad a 10 out of 10. Okay, next one up is St. Charles Square, which is a kind of grungy, kind of raw sort of song. You know, it's probably, and I don't want to say it's like a throwback to like, I guess it's maybe a throwback to the kind of self-titled Blur album, like that kind of side, like off like the band. Very kind of abrasive kind of guitar sound on it. Reminds me a lot of Robert Fripp's playing on like David Bowie's Fashion, this kind of screeching guitar but kind of teamed with a slightly more again, I don't say poppy arrangement or poppy song, but it's more, it is more of a kind of straight ahead song. But lyrically, I mean, it's good. It's full of kind of paranoia. You kind of like the chorus goes out because there's something down here and it's living under the floorboards. It's grabbed me round the neck with its long and slender claw. He's kind of sort of like singing like in like on like this track. I mean, I do like the song, but I think it's maybe just a bit like unmelodic. You know, Albon's kind of slightly more speaking the song than singing it, like, than anything. And like I said, doesn't have too much like off like a good melody to it. But it's like, is a good welcome burst of energy like for the album. It's a song which I think like they've opened like all of like their recent gigs with it, so it's a good song. Again, not what I'd necessarily go to outside of the album though. Okay, next up is another favourite of mine. It's the song Barbaric, and this lyrically at least is quite a sad kind of breakup song, but musically it's got a really kind of peppy, kind of upbeat like arrangement, very playful like kind of like arrangement, and a great kind of catchy chorus like that. I have lost the feeling that I thought I'd never lose. Now where am I going? But it just sounds so great, and again the harmony vocals work really, really, really well, like between Albon, Roundtree, and Coxton. And again, you've got some nice guitar playing like as well. It kind of alternates between kind of Johnny Marr like arpeggios and this more kind of abrasive, kind of straight ahead, like sort of like echoed kind of pedal work. So I think it really works well, this track. It's a real favourite, man. Again, a real grower, you know. Again, like this past week, like I've had this album, this is one which I think has become a firm favourite of mine. So yeah, Barbaric I would give another 10 out of 10 to.
With headphones on, you won't hear that much.
Okay, the next one up is Russian Strings. Now this one is a track which Albon has said is about like Russia's invasion like of like Ukraine, and like kind of like the kind of fallout like from that, like at like the minute, and like whatnot. I think it's, again, lyrically it's about how I guess the world's attention kind of moves on quickly from these kind of events and that. So he sings like the tenements came crashing down with headphones on, you won't hear that much. I mean, it's another really nicely produced track, a slower pace this one, but I think it works. Like at like this point, like on like the album, like after, like as I said, St. Charles Square and like Barbaric being quite upbeat songs, this one it's nice just to get a kind of slightly slower track. I'd say Arbon's vocals good on this, but he does sound a bit to me like he's doing a bit of like an Alex Turner impression, like from like the Arctic Monkeys and that. And again, like the drums have got a very similar feeling to some of their recent stuff. So I guess it's maybe not much of a surprise considering like they use like the same producer. But no, like a decent track here, and yeah, one I would give an 8 out of 10 to.
There be grace for everyone.
Okay, and then side one closes with the Everglades for Leonard. It says like in brackets there, and this is a really, really lovely song. It's got a very tender like acoustic bass, like this one here, and lyrically I guess a song about like regrets and that, like many ghosts inside my mind, many paths I wish I'd taken, many times I thought I'd break. He sings on it, and again there's a really nice arrangement on it. So it starts very quiet, but then a lovely string part comes in for like the chorus. But then my only gripe with this is it's too short. You know, it's just a single verse like a chorus. But then I guess it's maybe one thing maybe leaves you wanting more, which is a good thing. But I do just think it maybe ends a little bit too abruptly for me. I think they could have certainly developed this song like a lot more. But no, it's really good while it's on. So yeah, the Everglades would get an 8 out of 10.
I'm the shining light in your eyes.
Okay, now side 2 opens up with lead-off single The Narcissist, which is a really great song. Again, it's one which grown on me a lot. I really liked it when it came out, but now it's a firm favourite of mine, like to be honest out with you. I think it manages to be both very fresh sounding, you know, it doesn't kind of throw back to kind of old Blur, but like in a way it kind of does though. It kind of feels like very like old school Blur, like at like the same time. So it's quite odd like in like that regard. I guess lyrically it's about maybe kind of Albon's past issues like with like drug addiction and like that. So he sort of things like, my heart it quickened, I could not tear myself away, became addiction, if you see darkness look away. And again, a very infectious track with great backing vocals on it and a really catchy chorus that like I could shine a light in your eyes, but it's just really great, really catchy. So I would give this one a full 10 out of 10.
Bye to you and me.
Okay, next up is Goodbye Albert. Now this one is, I can't quite make my mind up with this track. I don't know if I like it or like if I think it's just a bit average. I mean, I'm kind of leaning now to it being a bit average, but I did like it when I first heard it. You know, it's got a very kind of playful, kind of psychedelic Syd Barrett-esque kind of guitar riff. You know, it reminds me a bit of the track Far Out from like the Parklife album. Like it's quite a similar kind of atmosphere like to like that track. But again, this one lyrically is quite a kind of down sort of song. Like it sings like, I stayed away, I gave you time, why don't you talk to me anymore, don't punish me forever. So again, very kind of heartfelt, like on like a sleeve, like kind of like lyrics to this on here. But I think just musically like it's a little bit middling for me, and I would give it a 7 out of 10. I mean, it might grow on me again, but yeah, for the time being I think that one will get a 7 out of 10.
Far away island.
Okay, next one is Faraway Island, which is another one of these kind of slower tracks like on the album. Again, quite a spacey production on this, and lyrics about a kind of long distance like relationship where he's kind of thinking about someone who's maybe not in his life anymore, possibly. Like things like, what are you doing tonight? Are you dancing? Are there new tunes to play? And again, he sings it really well with like a lot of feeling. A good guitar solo on this, which kind of I think like lifts like the track and gives it a good kind of atmosphere. But I do just think it's a little bit like unmemorable in terms of its melody. It doesn't really stick out to me as much. So yeah, it would get a 7 out of 10 for that one.
What's the point of hanging Avalon?
Okay, and now the penultimate track is Avalon, which I think is a really, really good song. Very chilled out kind of arrangement, but you've got kind of horns on this one, a kind of wee brass section, which gives it a different feeling to some of like the other tracks like on the album. again, again about a kind of guy who's kind of just out of like a relationship and kind of questioning a lot about like his life. So you sort of things like wishing I could make you happy, torn apart somehow. It must be the waves we were carried on. But I think it's really good, and I think it's kind of got a good contrast between those kind of very chilled out verses and then this chorus where the kind of guitar becomes a bit more intense, and like again I think it's kind of like that contrast keeps the song quite interesting. So yeah, for me, like Avalon is one of the stronger tracks and would get a 9 out of 10.
Suppose I'm on my own tonight.
Okay, and then the album closes with a track, The Heights, which is an interesting track lyrically. I think on kind of first listening, you kind of think it's maybe about the connection between the band like, and like their audience. Like so he sort of sings like, I gave you a lot of heart, so did you, standing in the back row, this one's for you. But then later then kind of becomes a bit more general about kind of talking about, I guess, reaching the heights and kind of standing next to you and like that kind of thing. So maybe there's some elements of it being like about death, I think, possibly this track. But I would say with this is again a little bit unmemorable in terms of its melody, and then it kind of has again a slightly puzzling end. It's not the longest track, it's only 3.5 minutes, and it ends with this kind of wall of guitar sound, so it's kind of comes to a kind of crashing halt, and it's a bit of an odd ending for the album for me personally. So yeah, The Heights would get a 7 out of 10. Okay, so overall this album would get 84%, so I think this is a really great record. I think I'm glad that they came back like with a new album rather than just like the tours, because I think this is all round a really good addition to their discography. A few things to note though, it is actually like their shortest album at only 36 minutes on this kind of like the standard version of it, which I guess I'm somewhat glad about, because you know a lot of the tracks, particularly like on side 2, are quite slow, very chilled out, and some of them I guess get a bit monotonous like in places, so I guess if there was more material of that kind of ilk, I would say the album would possibly start to drag. But then they have released a few bonus tracks, and I must actually say I probably prefer a lot of those bonus tracks to some of the stuff that actually made it like onto the album. There's a track called The Rabbi, which I think is brilliant, and then there's I think the Japanese bonus track is a Graham Coxon song called Sticks and Stones, which is possibly my favourite from the whole sessions. Definitely try and check that one out on like on like YouTube. I think it's brilliant. But overall for me, I mean, this isn't a kind of happy kind of nostalgia filled album, you know, like on it like there's a deep kind of sense of sadness here, but also some great arrangements, you know, really kind of tastefully produced this album. I think some nice kind of psychedelic touches on it as well, like in places, but it certainly for me is a kind of far cry from what made Blur kind of great and kind of stand out, you know, like they're not sort of like rehashing like the kind of like the 90s stuff, which I suppose like is good, but then it kind of makes the album feel like, I don't know, like a little bit like out of place, like in like their discography possibly, and it's also overall quite an unbalanced album. You know, side 1 is definitely the stronger side. Like even though I guess side 2 does kick off like with like the best track on it, I do think that yeah, side 1 is definitely notable for how strong like and consistent like it is. So yeah, that's been my review of the Ballad of Darren there by Blur. So I hope you have enjoyed. If you've got like any requests for future reviews, please do leave them down below in the comments, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.